Quiet, they'll hear us. The whisper brushed against Elena Carter's ear a second before a hand closed around her wrist and pulled her hard into the darkness, her breath catching as her back collided with something solid, warm, unmoving. The scent of pine and cold night air wrapping around her senses as panic surged through her chest, her mind scrambling to understand what was happening, who he was, why he was touching her. But the answer died before it formed because footsteps echoed just beyond the trees, slow, deliberate, searching, and suddenly the stranger's grip made sense, not as a threat, but as a shield, his other hand hovering near her shoulder, not forcing, just steady, grounding, as if he could feel the tremor running through her. "Don't move," he murmured, his voice low, controlled, carrying a quiet authority that cut through her fear, and she froze, every muscle locked in place as shadows shifted between the branches. Moonlight slicing through in pale streaks that almost revealed them, almost gave them away. Her heart hammered so loudly she was certain it would betray them, her breath shallow, uneven, brushing against his chest, and she became painfully aware of how close he was, inches, maybe less, the heat of him impossible to ignore, too intense for a stranger, too steady for a man hiding in the dark. Something about him didn't fit, didn't feel human in the way the others did. The ones laughing at the festival, the ones who had cornered her minutes ago, their voices still, ringing faintly in the distance, cruel, careless, fading now as they moved farther into the woods, hunting something, or someone, and realization hit her all at once, sharp and cold. They were looking for her. Her fingers curled instinctively against her skirt as she fought the urge to run, to break free from this stranger's hold. But his hand tightened just slightly at her wrist, not painful, just enough to keep her anchored, to remind her that stepping out meant being seen, meant being found. And for reasons she couldn't explain, she trusted that instinct, trusted him, even as her pulse refused to slow, even as her mind warned her that she knew nothing about the man behind her, a stranger hidden in shadows, his face obscured, his presence overwhelming. And yet there was something else beneath the fear, something quieter, deeper, a strange pull that made her chest ache, like recognition without memory, like her body understood something her mind hadn't caught up to yet. Her breath hitched as a branch snapped nearby, closer this time, too close, her body reacting before she could stop it, a soft sound escaping her lips, barely more than air, but enough, and in an instant his arm shifted, drawing her tighter against him, his presence surrounding her completely, shielding her from the thin beam of moonlight that swept past, his head lowering slightly, his voice now a breath against her ear. "Easy," he said, softer this time, almost gentle, and the words settled into her bones, grounding her in a way nothing else could. The footsteps paused, tension stretching through the forest like a held breath, and for a moment the world narrowed to silence, to the space between heartbeats, to the feel of his hand still wrapped around her wrist, steady, unwavering. Then the sound faded, the presence beyond the trees dissolving into the night, and only then did she realize she was still pressed against him, still held in place, her pulse gradually slowing, her thoughts beginning to return, and with them came the question she could no longer ignore. Who was he? Because no ordinary man moved like that. No ordinary man stood so still while danger passed inches away, and no ordinary man made the air feel heavier just by being there. She swallowed, gathering what little courage she had left, her voice barely above a whisper. "Who are you?" she asked, but he didn't answer right away, and when he finally shifted, just enough for a sliver of moonlight to catch his eyes, the breath left her lungs completely, silver, unmistakable, impossible to mistake for anything else. And in that single moment, everything changed. Elena's breath caught in her throat as those silver eyes held hers, not cold, not distant, but sharp with something that felt too aware, too intentional, as if he had been watching her long before this moment, as if he already knew something she did not, and her instincts reacted before her thoughts could catch up, a quiet pull tightening in her chest, unfamiliar yet impossible to ignore, her fingers trembling slightly where they rested near his arm, not pushing him away, not yet, because despite everything, despite the danger that still lingered in the forest around them, she did not feel threatened, she felt seen. and that realization unsettled her more than the footsteps had. "You should not be here," he said finally, his voice low, controlled, carrying a weight that made the air between them feel heavier, and she frowned, confusion breaking through the haze of adrenaline. "Neither should you," she whispered back, the words slipping out before she could stop them, and for a brief second, something shifted in his expression, subtle, almost imperceptible, but there, like the flicker of a hidden emotion he was not used to showing, his grip loosened just enough to give her space. Though he did not step away, did not fully release her, as if distance itself was a risk he was unwilling to take. The silence stretched between them, filled with unspoken questions, until a distant voice echoed through the trees again, closer than before, searching, calling out, and Elena felt her pulse spike all over again, her body tensing instinctively. But this time she did not pull away. She leaned slightly closer instead, trusting without understanding why. His presence a quiet anchor in the chaos, his head tilted slightly, listening, calculating. Then his gaze dropped back to her, more focused now, more intense. "They are not going to stop," he said, each word deliberate, and she swallowed, her mind racing. "Why are they looking for me?" she asked, her voice barely steady. Because she needed to know, needed something to make sense, but he did not answer directly, his jaw tightening just slightly, as if the truth was something he was choosing to hold back, something that would change everything if spoken out loud. Instead, he shifted his stance, positioning himself between her and the direction of the voices, a protective instinct so natural it felt ingrained, not a decision, but a reflex, and that alone told her more than words could. He was not just anyone hiding in the dark. He was someone used to standing between danger and whatever he chose to protect. Her breath slowed, just a little, as the realization settled deeper. "You knew they were coming," she said quietly, piecing it together, the timing, the way he had pulled her away seconds before she would have been found. His silence was answer enough, and something in her chest tightened again. Not fear this time. Something else, something closer to certainty. "Who are you?" she asked again, softer now, because the question had changed. It was no longer about curiosity. It was about understanding the gravity of the situation she had stepped into, the weight of the moment pressing in from all sides. And for a second, he simply looked at her, as if deciding how much to reveal, how far to let this connection go. Then the clouds shifted above them, moonlight breaking through the canopy just enough to illuminate his face more clearly, the sharp lines, the controlled expression, the eyes that reflected light like polished metal, unmistakable, undeniable, and the answer settled in her chest before he even spoke. "Lucian," he said quietly, not a title, not a declaration, just a name, but it carried more weight than anything else could have, because names held power, and he had just given her his. The realization hit her all at once, the story she had heard, the whispers that followed the Alpha King like shadows, the presence that could silence a room without a word, and she stared at him, unable to hide the shift in her expression, the understanding, the disbelief, the sudden awareness of who was standing inches away from her. Her lips parted slightly, but no words came out, because what could she say? How could she respond when the man holding her in the shadows was not just a stranger, not just a protector, but the one person every pack feared, respected, obeyed? And yet he had not left her, had not turned away, had not treated her like someone beneath him. Instead, he was still there, still close, still watching her, as if she mattered, and that made her heart race in a completely different way. The silence between them deepened, heavy with everything unsaid, until he spoke again, quieter this time, almost like a warning meant only for her. "Elena," he said, and her entire body stilled, her name on his lips sending a sharp wave of shock through her system, because she had never told him, had never given him that. And yet he knew. Of course he knew. He was the Alpha King, and suddenly the world felt smaller, more dangerous, more defined by his presence than anything else. Her breath hitched as she looked up at him, truly seeing him now, not just the man in the shadows, but the power behind him, the control, the certainty, and the unspoken claim that lingered in the space between them. "You are not safe out here," he continued, his voice firm now, leaving no room for argument. And before she could respond, before she could question or resist, His hand shifted again, not pulling her this time, but guiding, steady, inevitable. "Stay with me," he said, and something in the way he spoke made it feel less like a suggestion and more like a line her life had already crossed, a moment that could not be undone. And deep down, beneath the fear and confusion, Elena realized she was already following. Elena did not remember deciding to move, yet her feet followed the subtle pull of his hand as he guided her deeper between the trees, away from the open paths, away from the fading voices, her senses sharpening with every step. The forest no longer a place of quiet beauty, but a shifting maze of shadows and silence. Her breath still uneven, though it had nothing to do with running now. Everything about him felt too present, too close. His pace steady, unhurried, as if he owned the darkness around them, as if nothing in it could touch him, and by extension, nothing could touch her as long as she stayed within reach. That thought should have frightened her, the certainty in it. The way her safety seemed to depend entirely on someone she had only just met, someone she had been taught her entire life to fear from a distance. Yet the fear refused to settle, replaced instead by a strange, quiet awareness that kept pulling her attention back to him, to the way his hand never tightened. Unnecessarily, to the way he adjusted his steps when she stumbled slightly over a root, to the way he listened to the forest as if it spoke directly to him. "You are not asking the right question," Lucian said after a moment, his voice cutting gently through the silence, and she blinked, her thoughts shifting. "Then what should I be asking?" she replied, her tone softer now, less defensive, because something had already changed between them, something she could not name. He slowed, just slightly, enough for her to catch up fully beside him instead of trailing half a step behind, his gaze flicking toward her before returning to the path ahead. "Not who I am," he said, calm, deliberate, "but why they chose you." The words settled heavily, and Elena felt her chest tighten, because that question carried a weight she had been trying not to face, her mind racing back through the evening, through the laughter, the dismissive glances, the way she had stayed at the edges of the festival like she always did, invisible. By design, by expectation, by survival. Nothing about her should have drawn attention, nothing about her should have made her a target. "There is nothing to choose," she said quickly, almost reflexively, the old belief rising to protect her from disappointment, from scrutiny, from hope. "I am just an omega." The sentence came out quieter than she intended, edged with something she had spent years pretending did not matter. And for the first time since she had met him, Lucian stopped completely, turning to face her fully, the shift so sudden it pulled her out of her thoughts, his expression unreadable, yet his eyes sharper now, focused in a way that made her feel as though he was seeing through every word she had just spoken. "No," he said simply, and that single word held more certainty than anything she had ever been told about herself. She opened her mouth to argue, to insist, to fall back into the safety of what she knew. But the look in his eyes stopped her, not harsh, not commanding, just unwavering. And something inside her hesitated, something that had been quiet for a long time. "You felt it," he continued, his voice lowering slightly, not louder, but more direct, as if the forest itself was no longer the thing they needed to be careful of. "Back there, when you were about to step into the clearing," her breath caught again. Because he was right. There had been a moment, a flicker of something she had not understood, a pull that had made her pause, had made her turn her head slightly, as if something was calling her without sound. She had dismissed it, told herself it was nerves, imagination, but now, standing here, with him watching her like that, she could not ignore it anymore. "That was not fear," he said, quieter now, and the words landed somewhere deep, somewhere she had kept hidden even from herself. "Then what was it?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper, and for a brief second, something shifted in his expression again, softer, almost reluctant, as if he was stepping closer to a truth he had not planned to reveal so soon. "Recognition," he answered, and the word changed everything, not in a loud, dramatic way, but in a slow, steady shift that made the ground beneath her feel less certain. Her pulse quickened, not from danger this time, but from the weight of what that meant, of what it could mean, because recognition implied connection, implied something already formed, already waiting, something that had nothing to do with status or expectation, nothing to do with what she had been told she was worth. She shook her head slightly, instinctively resisting, because accepting that would mean letting go of everything she had believed about herself, about her place in this world. "You are wrong," she said, though her voice lacked conviction now, and Lucian watched her for a moment longer before stepping closer again, not invading, not forcing, just closing the distance enough that the space between them felt intentional, chosen. "Then why are you still here?" he asked quietly, and she did not have an answer, not one she could say out loud, because the truth was already there, already shaping her next step, her next breath, her next choice. She could have walked away, could have turned back toward the festival, toward the familiar roles she understood, but she had not. She had followed him instead, into the unknown, into the shadows, into something that was beginning to feel less like danger and more like the edge of something inevitable, and that realization lingered between them, unspoken, undeniable, as the night seemed to hold its breath around them. The silence between them did not break. It deepened, stretching into something that felt almost tangible, like the forest itself was waiting, listening. Elena's chest rising slowly as she tried to steady her breathing, but her thoughts refused to settle, his question lingering in her mind. "Why are you still here?" Because she knew the answer, even if she could not say it, even if she did not fully understand it yet. Her gaze dropped for a moment, tracing the ground between them, the scattered leaves, the faint silver glow of moonlight slipping through branches overhead, anything to avoid the intensity of his eyes. But that only lasted a second before she looked back up, drawn again despite herself. "If this is some kind of mistake," she said quietly, choosing her words carefully, "you should let me go before it gets worse." The sentence felt safer, familiar, rooted in the belief that she was not meant to stand in the center of anything important, not meant to be chosen, and certainly not by someone like him. Lucian did not respond right away, his expression unreadable, yet something in the set of his shoulders shifted, a subtle tension that had not been there before, as if her words had brushed against something deeper than she intended. He took a step closer, closing the small space she had tried to create, not aggressively, not forcing her back, just enough to make it clear that distance was not something he was willing to allow. Not anymore. "You think this is about chance," he said, his voice lower now, steadier, each word deliberate, and she felt the weight of it before she even processed what he meant. Her pulse quickened again, not from fear, but from the certainty in his tone, the quiet conviction that left no room for dismissal. "It is not," he continued, and there was something different in the way he spoke now, not just control, not just authority, but something edged with restraint, like he was holding back more than he was saying. Her breath caught slightly as the meaning began to settle in, because if it was not chance, then it was something else, something intentional, something inevitable, and that was far more unsettling. "Then what is it?" she asked, softer this time, her voice no longer defensive, just searching, because she needed to understand what she had stepped into, needed something to ground the shifting reality around her. Lucian's gaze did not waver, did not soften, but it changed, just enough for her to notice, just enough for her to feel it. "It is something that does not ask for permission," he said, and the words seemed to echo in the quiet space between them, settling deep, too deep. Her fingers curled slightly at her sides as she absorbed that, as she felt the truth of it resonate in a way logic could not explain, because she had felt it, that moment in the clearing, that pull, that recognition he had spoken of. She had tried to ignore it, tried to dismiss it as fear. But standing here now, with him this close, with everything else fading into the background, she could not deny it anymore. "That does not make sense," she said, though the protest was weaker now, her certainty slipping with every second she remained here. And Lucian's expression shifted again, not amused, not frustrated, just patient in a way she did not expect from someone like him. "It does not need to," he replied simply, and something about that answer unsettled her more than anything else, because it removed the last piece of control she had been holding on to, the idea that she could understand this, could rationalize it, could decide what it meant before it changed her life. A faint sound drifted through the trees again, distant but unmistakable, voices still searching, still moving, reminding her that the danger had not disappeared, it had only shifted. Her head turned slightly in that direction, instinct pulling her attention away, but before she could take a step, his hand moved again, not grabbing, not restraining, just brushing lightly against her wrist, enough to bring her focus back to him, to anchor her in the present moment. "Stay," he said, and the word carried a quiet finality that sent a ripple through her chest. Not command, not quite, but something stronger than a request, something that felt like it had already been decided long before she had a chance to consider it. Her lips parted slightly, a response forming, but it never came, because in that moment she realized something she had not been ready to face. She was not staying because he told her to. She was staying because a part of her did not want to leave, and that truth settled over her like a quiet storm, shifting everything without making a sound. Her gaze lifted to meet his again, and for the first time since this began, she did not look away, did not retreat, did not hide behind the version of herself she had always been told to be. Instead, she stood there, steady, uncertain, but present, and the night around them seemed to change in response. The shadows no longer just a place to hide, but a space where something new was beginning to take shape, something neither of them could fully control, yet neither of them seemed willing to walk away from. The moment stretched thinner, sharper, like the air itself had tightened around them, and Elena could feel it in her chest, that quiet pressure building, not from fear, not entirely, but from the weight of something unfolding that she could not stop anymore. Her fingers flexed slightly at her sides as she tried to ground herself, to hold on to something familiar, but nothing about this felt familiar. Not the way he stood so close without hesitation, not the way his presence seemed to quiet every instinct telling her to run, not even the way her own body responded to him, steadying instead of panicking, as if it recognized him on a level her thoughts could not reach. Her breath came slower now, deeper, yet each inhale carried his scent again, pine, cold air, something sharper beneath it, something alive, and it pulled at her senses in a way that made her chest tighten. "You feel it too," Lucian said quietly, not a question, more like a confirmation spoken aloud, and her gaze flickered up to meet his, startled by the certainty in his tone, because she had not said anything, had not given him that, yet somehow he knew. Of course he knew, and that realization sent a ripple through her, a mixture of unease and something else she could not quite name. "I do not know what you think I feel," she replied, her voice softer now, less guarded, but still holding on to a thin line of resistance, because admitting it meant stepping fully into whatever this was, and she was not sure she was ready for that. Not yet. Lucian studied her for a moment, his eyes narrowing just slightly, not in suspicion, but in focus, as if he was listening to something beneath her words, something deeper than her voice. "You are trying to ignore it," he said, calm, direct, and her breath caught again because he was right. Every part of her wanted to dismiss this, to push it away, to return to the version of the world that made sense, where she was invisible, where she was safe in being overlooked, but that world felt further away with every second she stood here. "Because it does not make sense," she answered, her voice barely above a whisper now, and there it was again, that quiet vulnerability she had spent years hiding, the truth slipping through despite her efforts. Lucian's expression shifted, not softer, but more intent, as if her honesty had changed something, as if it mattered more than anything else she could have said. "It does not need to," he repeated, but this time the words carried something else with them, something deeper, something that settled in her chest instead of pushing against it. A faint tremor moved through her as the realization pressed closer, unavoidable now. She felt it, that pull, that strange, undeniable awareness that tied her to him in a way she could not explain. It was not just proximity, not just circumstance. It was something beneath that, something older, something that had been waiting for this exact moment. Her fingers curled slightly, as if she could grasp it, understand it, but it slipped through her thoughts every time she tried, leaving only the feeling behind, strong, persistent, impossible to ignore. "Why me?" she asked quietly, the question finally breaking through, because that was the part she could not reconcile. Not him, not what he was, but why he was here with her, why this was happening at all. Lucian did not answer immediately, and for the first time since she had met him, there was a pause, a real one, as if he was choosing his words carefully, or perhaps deciding how much truth she was ready to hear. His gaze shifted briefly toward the trees, toward the direction of the distant voices that had not fully disappeared, then back to her, more focused than before. "That is not something I can explain in a way you will accept right now," he said. Finally, his tone steady, but there was something restrained beneath it, something held back, and that alone told her the answer was not simple, not something she could brush aside. Her chest tightened slightly at that, frustration mixing with curiosity, with the need to understand what was happening to her, what was changing inside her with every second she stayed here. "Then give me something," she said, her voice stronger now, more certain, because she needed something to hold on to. Something real. Lucian stepped closer again, not invading, not forcing, just closing the space until the air between them felt charged, deliberate, his eyes locking onto hers with a quiet intensity that made it impossible to look away. "You were not invisible to me," he said, and the words landed harder than anything else he had said so far, because they cut through everything she believed about herself, everything she had built her life around, the idea that she was unseen, unnoticed, safe in the background, and in one sentence, he dismantled it completely. Her breath caught sharply, her mind struggling to process that, to reconcile it with everything she knew. Because if he had seen her, truly seen her, then what did that mean? What had he noticed? What had drawn him to her in the first place? Her thoughts spun, but the answer was already there, lingering in the silence between them. In the way his gaze had never once wavered, in the way he stood here now, not leaving, not turning away, as if walking away was no longer an option, and that realization settled over her slowly, deeply, changing something fundamental she could not put into words. The forest remained quiet around them, the distant threat still present but fading into the background, because in this moment, none of that felt as immediate as the truth standing right in front of her, that whatever this was, whatever had begun tonight, it was not something she could simply step away from, and the longer she stayed, the clearer that became. The words lingered between them, heavier than the night air, and Elena felt something shift inside her, not sudden, not overwhelming, but steady, like a door she had kept closed her entire life had just been pushed open without asking. Her breath slowed, her thoughts quieter now, yet sharper, because she could not ignore it anymore. The way he looked at her, the way he spoke as if she mattered, as if she had always mattered, and that truth felt unfamiliar, almost fragile. Her fingers tightened slightly at her sides as she searched for something to say, something that could anchor her in this moment. "You should not have noticed me," she said softly, not as a protest this time, but as a truth she had lived with for years, a rule she had learned to survive. And Lucian's gaze did not waver. If anything, it deepened, his expression still controlled, yet something behind it shifted, something more personal, more deliberate. "That was never an option," he replied, and the certainty in his voice sent a quiet ripple through her chest, because it was not just confidence, it was inevitability, as if noticing her had not been a choice, but a consequence of something far beyond either of them. Elena swallowed, her pulse quickening again, not from fear, but from the weight of what that meant. Because if this was not random, if this was not chance, then it was something else, something she could not step away from so easily. Her gaze dropped for a moment, her thoughts racing through everything she knew, everything she believed about herself, trying to reconcile it with the reality standing in front of her. But nothing fit, nothing aligned, and that uncertainty pressed in from all sides. "I do not understand this," she admitted quietly, her voice steady but edged with something raw, something real, because she was no longer trying to hide behind denial. Lucian exhaled. Slowly, not frustrated, not impatient, just measured, as if he had expected this, as if he had been waiting for her to reach this point. "You are not supposed to," he said, and there was a softness in the words now, subtle but unmistakable, something that made them feel less like a statement and more like reassurance. Her eyes lifted to meet his again, drawn by that shift, by the way his voice had changed, and for a moment, the tension between them eased, not gone, but different, less sharp, more grounded, as if something fragile had settled into place. "Then why tell me any of it?" she asked, her voice quieter now, because if he knew she would not understand, why bring her into this at all? Why not let her walk away? Why not leave her in the safety of what she already knew? Lucian stepped closer again, not enough to overwhelm, just enough to close the distance that still remained, his presence steady, intentional. "Because you already felt it," he said, and the words landed deeper. This time, because she could not deny that anymore. Not after everything that had happened, not after the way her body had reacted before her mind could catch up, the way she had followed him without thinking, the way she was still standing here instead of running back to the light, to the noise, to the people who would have told her to stay in her place. Her breath caught slightly as the realization settled again, stronger now, clearer. She was not here by accident. She had chosen to stay, even if she did not fully understand why. A faint sound carried through the trees again, distant but present, a reminder that the world beyond this moment still existed, still moving, still searching. And Elena felt the tension return, subtle but real, her instincts pulling her attention outward. But before she could speak, before she could question what came next, Lucian's hand moved again, not grabbing, not restraining, just resting lightly against her wrist, grounding her, bringing her focus back to him. "They are getting closer again," he said quietly, his tone shifting back to something more focused, more alert, and the softness that had been there moments ago faded, replaced by something sharper, something more controlled. Elena nodded slightly, her breath steadying as she forced herself to stay present, to trust what was happening instead of fighting it, because whatever this was, whatever had begun between them, it was not something she could pause or revisit later. It was unfolding now, in real time, and she was part of it whether she was ready or not. Her gaze met his again, searching, questioning, but also steady, because despite everything, despite the uncertainty, the fear, the overwhelming nature of it all, there was one thing she could not ignore. She felt safer standing here with him than she had anywhere else tonight, and that truth anchored her in a way nothing else could. Lucian studied her for a moment longer, as if reading that realization in her expression, then gave a small, almost imperceptible nod, as if acknowledging something unspoken between them, before shifting his stance slightly, positioning himself once again between her and the direction of the sound, his presence solid, unwavering. And in that moment, Elena understood something she had not before. This was not just about danger. This was not just about being found or hidden. This was about something far more personal, something that had already begun to change the course of her life, and the further she stepped into it, the clearer that became. The forest shifted again, not with sound, but with presence, something subtle yet unmistakable pressing in from beyond the trees, and Elena felt it before she heard it, a tightening in her chest, a quiet instinct that told her the distance between them and whoever was searching had shortened. Her breath slowed instinctively as her body reacted, not panicked, not frozen, but alert in a way she had never experienced before. And beside her, Lucian stilled completely, his posture changing in an instant, every trace of softness gone, replaced by something sharper, something precise. His attention focused outward now, listening to the silence as if it carried meaning she could not yet hear. "Stay close," he said quietly, his voice low, controlled, but firmer than before, and this time there was no question in it, no space for hesitation. Elena nodded without thinking, her body already responding before her mind caught up, stepping slightly closer, her shoulder nearly brushing his arm. The proximity no longer surprising, no longer something she questioned. It simply felt right, necessary, the air between them charged with something steady, grounding, as the faint sound of movement drifted through the trees again, closer now, more defined, careful steps, measured, deliberate, searching with purpose. Her pulse picked up, but it did not spiral. It held, anchored by the quiet certainty in his presence. Lucian's gaze shifted slightly, tracking something she could not see, his expression unreadable, but his focus absolute, as if the entire world had narrowed down to a single point just beyond their line of sight. "Do not react," he murmured, barely above a breath, and she swallowed, forcing herself to still completely, every instinct screaming to turn, to look, to confirm what was coming, but she did not move. She trusted him, even without understanding why, even without knowing what he planned to do. A shadow passed between the trees, faint, distant, but enough for her to feel the shift in the air, the awareness that they were not alone, that someone was close enough to see if she made a single mistake. Her fingers tightened slightly at her sides, her breath shallow now, controlled, as seconds stretched thin, fragile, and then something changed, not outside, but within, a sudden, quiet pull in her chest, stronger than before, sharper, her focus snapping back to him as if drawn by something unseen, and she felt it again, clearer this time, undeniable, a connection that did not belong to fear or proximity, something deeper, something that responded to him specifically. Her breath hitched softly before she could stop it, and Lucian reacted instantly, his gaze snapping to hers, something flashing behind his eyes, recognition, confirmation, something that matched the pull she felt inside her. The moment stretched, suspended between them, as if time itself had slowed, the distant presence fading into the background, becoming secondary to whatever was happening here, now, between them. You see it now, he said quietly, not asking, not doubting, and she could not answer, not with words, because there was nothing she could say that would explain it. The way her chest felt too full, the way her thoughts seemed to blur at the edges, leaving only that steady, undeniable awareness in its place. Her lips parted slightly, but no sound came out, and for the first time since this began, she did not try to deny it, did not try to push it away. She let herself feel it fully, and that changed everything. Lucian exhaled slowly, a subtle shift in his stance as if something had settled into place, something confirmed beyond question. His hand moved again, not to guide, not to restrain, but to steady, resting lightly against her wrist, grounding her as the connection between them seemed to sharpen, deepen, becoming something more defined with every passing second. The forest around them remained still, the distant search continuing somewhere beyond the shadows, but it no longer felt immediate, no longer felt like the center of this moment, because something else had taken its place, something far more personal, far more significant. Elena's gaze remained locked on his, her breathing uneven but steady, her mind no longer racing, but quiet in a way that felt almost surreal, as if she had stepped into something that existed outside of everything she had known before. And in that silence, in that stillness, the truth became impossible to ignore. Whatever this was, whatever had begun the moment he pulled her into the shadows, it had not been random, it had not been temporary. It was something that had been waiting, something that had found her whether she was ready or not. And now that it had, there was no going back, no returning to the version of herself who believed she could remain unseen, because he had seen her, truly seen her, and in doing so, he had changed everything. The connection did not fade. It settled, deeper, steadier, like something that had finally found where it belonged, and Elena felt it in every breath she took, in the way her pulse no longer raced from fear but from awareness, her gaze still locked with his, unable to look away even as the world beyond them continued to move, continued to search, because for the first time, that world felt distant, secondary to what was happening here, now, between them. Lucian did not step back, did not break the moment, his expression calm yet focused, as if he was allowing this, allowing her to feel it fully before anything else interrupted, before reality forced its way back in. And for a few seconds, that was all there was, the quiet, the connection, the understanding that neither of them spoke aloud, until the sound returned, closer this time, clearer, voices cutting through the trees with more urgency, more intent, and the shift was immediate, the stillness between them breaking as Lucian's focus snapped outward again, his body moving slightly, placing himself between her and the direction of the sound without hesitation, instinct taking over where words were no longer needed. Elena felt it too, the change, the reminder that whatever had begun here did not exist in isolation. It existed within a world that would not understand it, would not accept it easily. Her breath tightened slightly as she turned her head just enough to catch the faint outline of movement between the trees. Closer now. Too close, her instincts urging her to step back, to hide. But she did not move far, not beyond the reach of his presence, because that instinct, the one that kept her near him, was stronger, steadier. They are circling, Lucian said quietly, his voice lower now, more focused, and there was something different in it, something sharper. Not fear, never fear, but calculation, awareness, as if he was already several steps ahead, already deciding what came next. Elena swallowed, her thoughts catching up to the reality of the situation, because hiding was no longer enough. The distance between them and the others had closed too much. The shadows that had protected them were thinning. "What do we do?" she asked softly, her voice steady despite the tension building around them. And Lucian's gaze flicked back to her for a brief second, something unreadable passing through his expression, before he looked away again, toward the approaching presence. "We do not run," he said, calm, certain, and the words settled into her chest with unexpected weight, because they were not just a decision, they were a statement of control, of confidence, as if running had never been an option in his mind, as if he did not see this as something to escape, but something to face. Her breath slowed again, not because the danger had lessened, but because she believed him, because something in his voice made it impossible not to. Her fingers curled slightly as she steadied herself, her thoughts sharpening, her focus narrowing to the moment ahead. The faint glow of moonlight shifted again, illuminating the edges of the clearing just beyond them, the space where the shadows would no longer hide them completely, and Elena felt the weight of that realization settle in. This moment was ending. Whatever had existed in the darkness between them was about to be seen, exposed to the world beyond. Her chest tightened slightly at that, not from fear, but from something else, something quieter, something that did not want to lose what had formed here. Even if it had only just begun, Lucian seemed to sense it, because his gaze returned to her once more, and for a brief second, the tension around them faded again, replaced by something steady, something certain. "Stay behind me," he said, and this time there was no softness in the words, no room for interpretation, just a clear, unwavering directive. And she nodded without hesitation, not because she was told to, but because she trusted him, fully now, in a way she had not expected, her steps shifting slightly as she positioned herself just behind him, close enough to feel the steady presence of him, the quiet strength that seemed to anchor everything around her. The voices grew louder, closer, shapes beginning to form beyond the trees, outlines of figures moving through the forest with purpose, their attention scanning the area, searching, and for a moment, everything slowed again, the space between seconds stretching as the inevitable drew closer. Elena's breath steadied, her thoughts quiet, her focus fixed, and as she stood there, just behind him, she realized something that settled deep within her. Whatever happened next, whatever this moment became, she was no longer the same person who had entered the forest tonight. Something had changed, something irreversible, and as the first figure stepped into the edge of the clearing, she did not step back, she did not hide, she stayed exactly where she was, because for the first time in her life, she did not feel invisible, she felt chosen. The first figure stepped fully into the clearing, and the moment shifted from hidden to undeniable. Moonlight spilling across the open space in pale silver lines that erased the safety of shadows. Elena's breath slowed as she stood just behind Lucian, her heart steady now in a way that surprised her, not because the danger was gone, but because something stronger had taken its place, something that anchored her even as unfamiliar eyes swept across the clearing, searching, assessing, trying to understand what they were seeing. Lucian did not move, did not step back, his presence calm, absolute, as if the space itself belonged to him. And in that stillness, something changed in the air, subtle yet unmistakable. The searching figures slowed, their movements faltering for a fraction of a second, recognition passing between them without words. Elena felt it ripple outward, the shift in energy, the quiet realization that they were no longer hunting blindly. They had found something, or someone, and that realization brought a different kind of tension, heavier, more deliberate. Her fingers curled slightly as she resisted the instinct to step back, to retreat into the trees, but she stayed exactly where she was, just as he had told her, just as she had chosen, because leaving was no longer an option, not for her, not after everything that had already changed. A voice broke through the silence, careful, measured, not loud, but clear enough to carry across the space between them. And though the words themselves were neutral, there was something beneath them, something cautious, something that acknowledged more than it revealed. Lucian's posture did not shift, but his presence seemed to sharpen, his focus narrowing, not aggressive, not threatening, simply undeniable. as if he had decided the moment had come to stop hiding, to step fully into what he was. Elena felt it before she saw it. That quiet expansion of something powerful, something controlled, the air itself seeming to settle around him, heavier, steadier, and for a brief second, everything else faded. The voices, the movement, the tension beyond the clearing, because her attention was drawn entirely to him, to the way he stood, to the way the space responded to his presence, as if the world itself recognized him. And in that moment, she understood something she had not fully grasped before. This was not just a man standing in front of her. This was the Alpha King, not in title alone, but in every subtle detail that made the air shift when he moved, when he chose to be seen. Her breath caught slightly as that realization settled deeper, not as fear, but as something far more complex, something that blended awe with certainty, because despite everything that defined him, despite everything she had been taught about what he represented, he had chosen to stand here with her, to shield her, to reveal himself in a way that could not be undone. The figures at the edge of the clearing seemed to recognize it too, their movements stilling, their attention focused now, no longer searching, but observing, waiting, and in that pause, that fragile space between action and reaction, Elena felt the weight of the moment settle around her. This was not just an ending. It was a beginning, something that would not remain hidden, something that would move beyond this forest, beyond this night, into a reality she had never imagined for herself. Lucian shifted slightly, just enough for her to see the profile of his face more clearly in the moonlight, his expression calm, composed, yet there was something beneath it, something that had not been there before, something that belonged to her, to the connection that had formed in the shadows. And when he spoke, his voice carried that same quiet certainty, low, controlled, meant for her even as others stood within earshot. "You do not step back now," he said, and the words settled into her chest with a finality that left no room for doubt. Her breath steadied as she absorbed them, as she realized what they meant, not just for this moment, but for everything that would follow, because stepping back would mean returning to the life she had lived before, the one where she was unseen, unheard, untouched by anything that could change her path. And she could not do that anymore, not after this, not after him. Her gaze lifted, meeting